Hi, Alan.
Hey, Michelle.
Today we're going to talk about interviewing, and I've been starting these with fun facts.
Okay.
So, if you have any, you're more than welcome. But here's my fun fact. My fun fact: I didn't know that there was this tool called HireFlix, where you can actually go through an interview, do behavioral interviews, where an organization can record different people in their organization, a behavioral question like, tell me about a time when you received really difficult feedback. And then, so they're on video, you click play, and then you watch this video, and then you record yourself for 4 minutes with your answer. And there's 10 questions, 10 videos that you watch, and then you record on top. Wasn't that a fun fact? I don't know. Did you know that this existed?
I did. I didn't know the name of that. I've heard of this before. I mean, there are some applications, even Indeed and ZipRecruiter and even LinkedIn to an extent, they have certain types of video interview capabilities. This one's pretty extreme, it sounds like, pretty specific on behavioral interviewing, and sounds like a really cool tool.
It was intense. So I went through it, and I did all, and I feel pretty good about recording a video. And even I was like, what happens is you're able to watch the video, take the time that you want to take to determine what your answer is, which is different than an actual interview, right? You wouldn't have that time in an actual interview. Mm-hmm. But then you're looking into the lens, and you're sharing the story, recording, and you got 4 minutes, and it's timing you as you're recording.
Some pressure.
I know it's a bit intense.
So was it one question, one answer at a time, or was there any opportunity for interaction?
No interaction whatsoever. No interaction.
I get to hear how you think, how you answer the question, and
Well, and you're not able to watch your own recording.
Oh, so you don't know how it came out?
No, exactly.
That's
was like, I thought so too. You get one try. Well, in each question, you can do one retake, but that's it. So if you flub up, then hopefully you don't flub up twice. Because you're not able to redo it. Exactly. But I thought that was interesting that you were not able to watch it and see, well, did I look weird? Did I, do stupid stuff in there? Nope.
So that's interesting. Also interesting is you have unlimited time, it sounds like, to prepare.
Correct.
So, I mean, I could listen to the question today, write down my notes, practice over and over, and get back to it tomorrow or tonight. It sounds like there might be some time limit, I suppose. But if there's not, that is an interesting, when we interview, we love to, there are all these different moving pieces.
Yeah.
So, you've been on the other side, you've been on both sides yourself. So we all have different strategies and influences and cultures, and sometimes a company culture, sometimes a personal culture. So when we as managers interview, some managers just want to know how you answer. They don't want you to take any time. First thought, how many restaurants are in DC? Right? I mean, stuff like that. Others, right? How do you respond? Others say,
I don't know.
Really think thoughtfully about this question, because I don't know anybody who knows the answer. I want to know if you know how many restaurants there are in DC. I want you to think about it. I want to hear a thoughtful. So hear the difference in how I ask the same question, but I'm looking for two different responses. On one, I just want to see how you respond, right? Quick. The other is I want to see how thoughtful you are in your approach. Both cases, it's really less about the data. It's more about the approach to answering. It's more about how you handle it. Because if I'm in a company or a situation where I know you might be surprised, I might ask you a surprise question. If I'm in more of an analytical type of role, I might ask you. So we all have different processes, and this one tool you looked at is really good for those situations where I just want to know your thoughtful approach to a question. I don't care how long it takes you, just tell me what you think. I see a gap that's filling. That's good. Very interesting.
Yeah. It is. It is really interesting. I sent it to Kathy as well because I thought that she might be
Yeah,
really interested in that. And then I
she would
obviously
be.
sent that information to you. And there's probably other tools, but that's the first time that I had been in that experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never, and I sent the gentleman that, that I went through this with. I said, "Has anybody bailed on these?" I'm really
Sure.
curious to know if anybody said, "You know what, not happening. I'm not doing this," because it's like just the fear,
I'm
would
sure
the
of it.
fear get in the way of doing it?
Yeah. I'm sure of it. There's a certain percentage of applicants that will simply not proceed with the interview questions or the process, whatever it is. It could be a simple 2 or 3 question request through Indeed. It could be a more structured behavioral interview, 10 question approach like what you just shared. There's always a certain percentage of folks that just want the easy apply button, like the Staples
Yeah,
big red button, the
right.
easy apply.
Exactly.
So, and,
Does
and
that exist, Alan? Or is there an easy apply button?
there
I
is,
guess.
there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there truly is. So, in it depends on how complex a manager wants to make it. I mean, I've been through multiple scenarios with different clients and different managers that some of them intentionally make it challenging for an applicant to apply because they want that applicant to go through a rigorous process to make sure that they really want it. So there's pluses and minuses to that. You might very well lose a very qualified applicant, or you feel a lot more secure when somebody applies that's qualified that you know that they really want it. And there are others that they literally, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, your own website, you can do a one-click apply type of approach. Upload a resume, press the apply button, and all they're doing is collecting a resume to show your interest. So, you get more paper. Yeah.
Amy's watching, Alan, and she wants to know how many restaurants are actually in DC.
I just asked the question. Amy.
I was like, that's awesome.
I don't know.
You don't know. I don't know. How would you answer that question in an interview, Alan?
So depending on where you are and what the role is, you'd want to be a thoughtful. The best answers that we get and that's just one question, but it could be how many X and Y, how many whatever, how many this or that. And it's really about thinking through the approach. So if you're looking at a program management or project management job or some kind of data analytics job, you need to have a thoughtful approach on a data analytics approach. So you need to think about, well, if I think that DC is a certain number of square miles and I know that there's a certain population in DC, or I can guess what that population is. And so you start using your own math that may or may not be accurate, but you use an analytical approach. I think DC is approximately, X square miles, and I think that there are Y number of people. And so if I think about X times Y times a certain percentage of difference, and so, right, so whatever that comes out with, versus if you're in HR, you never ask that question. There's no point. I don't care, right? It doesn't do anything for me to know how you think that way. I want to know about actual metrics. I want to know what's your cycle time, what's your process for delivery, and I want to know real numbers. Hypotheticals for me never really worked on an interview. When we talk about interviewing and behavioral interviewing, I think that too many managers, and I do coach on this, use the hypotheticals. What do you think you do if? How many of and there's a certain value to that to get someone to think about things that may or may not be real at the time, but you want to know the thought process. But to me, why can't you ask a question that's not hypothetical but real? If you know you're having a problem with time to market, ask a question. Have you ever had a behavioral question that's legit? It's not just some situational hypothetical. It's a real question about dealing with change and process. So I think the hypotheticals have a certain way of just starting a conversation, but they don't really give you the information you need, or at least they create a false positive sometimes.
What are you finding, Alan? Are there any new trends? I mean, we're just talking about that one as far as the video interviews. Are you seeing new trends as it relates to from a company's perspective, or those that are applying, or is it status quo?
It's generally status quo. There's not that many new tricks. I mean, video interviewing is a technical advancement. Excuse me, but it's been around for some time. It's the different types of video interviewing that you do. Like this one, I haven't heard of that directly, but I certainly have heard of a behavioral interviewing approach. It's kind of like, any other tech advancement. There are similarities, and, there's very few pioneers in any one area. And when it comes to the interview process, it's a lot of the same, but there's more business acumen. There's more soft skills involved. So there has been an evolution on the interviewing side where managers are recognizing, and you've heard the old quote about we hire for technical and fire for behavior. Well,
Right.
more and more companies and managers and owners are thinking about the behavioral side of it. They've been through this too many times, especially with all the COVID processes and all the folks that uh, changed jobs or didn't need jobs or stayed out to get more money on unemployment and all those moving pieces when there were jobs available, but people weren't required to go for them because of the COVID situation. So managers have really lately, more and more I've seen, focused on the behavioral side of the interview process, the soft skill side. They appreciate the need to communicate, the need to be civil in the workplace, the need to think through processes and solutions, business acumen stuff.
So how is that showing up for someone on the other side of the fence? So you, as far as those that are interviewing for positions or wanting new roles, how should they prepare, or how do they do that with finesse right now?
Right. And that's, of course, candidates need to catch up a little bit. Some businesses have had to catch up to the candidate side for some time on money, as we've seen, right, with the increases in minimum wage and all the competitive nature. And so now that companies are catching up, it's been somewhat of a candidate market for a while. It still is, especially here in Brevard, or you're up in Volusia, I think now, right?
Yeah, right now I am. Yep.
So I'm pretty sure you're seeing the same, right? The unemployment rate's pretty low. And there's still a bunch of folks that are out of work. They don't count as unemployed, but still, it's a buyer's market at this time. And I think that as candidates catch up, as job seekers catch up to what the companies need, this YouTube, the Simon Sinek's of the YouTube world, and the trainings and the books and your Brene Browns and so on, right? The more that people get acclimated and understand what some of these smart leaders are talking about, the quicker they'll be able to get the jobs that are more long-term. There's always going to be some type of retail short-term job for someone if that's what they want, where they're just using a way to get into a new role. That's what they call underemployed, if you've heard that term. There's always that. But if folks that are, most of the job seekers I speak with are looking for something long-term, we use the word permanent, although in HR we never talk permanent, but they're looking for something more long-term, right? More corporate, more beneficial to their career.
Long-term meaning, I mean, multiple years. I mean, in IT, you know, we do a lot of work in IT. So IT, it's generally like 1 to 2 years is technically long-term, which is kind of crazy, right?
So long-term is, and I don't mean to be flip, but just because no,
it's good.
Long-term meaning the opposite of short-term. So the opposite of, I just need something till I get my other job.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of that sometimes turn into longer term, but most of the time people do that. It's because they've been job seeking. They're, as I said before, about catching up. They may have the technical skills, but because there are enough candidates that are competing for the same role that have business acumen, soft skills, communication, capability to talk to folks, to think through strategically or even thoughtfully, they're not getting those same jobs. And so they're forced to take something else just to keep the lights on. That's short term.
So Amy was talking, she's like hiring for behavior, not just technical. She loves that shift. When you mentioned Brene Brown and you mentioned Simon Sinek, what are they talking about that's relevant for either companies that are hiring or people that are looking for jobs in that lens, as far as behavior, not just being a technical resource?
Yeah. So if we pick on Simon just for a second.
Yeah, let's pick on Simon.
That's the more recent ones that I see. The majority of the videos and the trainings I hear from Simon or anyone in that category are mostly geared toward companies, right? To the managers, loosening up, understanding what to look for. I think that, and this goes back to also your question about how can job seekers catch up. I think that job seekers and company managers to an extent tend to be short-sighted, thinking that video isn't meant for me. Like, you ever sit in a conference or something and somebody says something to you, Jay, and you're like, hey, did you hear that? He means you. Well, no, they mean you, Michelle. I mean, that's how it works.
It's like, it's both of us, not just me, right? Nice try.
It's almost always the person who thinks it's not about them that it really is, right?
Yeah, here's the mirror.
Right? That's right. And so I think that job seekers, as they think about where to go, I think listening to what managers say about what they're looking for in candidates and how to be better managers is where job seekers should spend their time. And I coach job seekers on that. I also coach hiring managers to do the same thing. Yeah, look at those, read the 7 Habits books and read the Lean In books and that's so important. But really, I want you to think about what is your client base, in this case, the job seeker, looking for. You do the same thing when you're building a business. We do all this client analysis. But managers and job seekers, we just go into, I'm pick on Indeed because that's the biggest one. I'll just post my resume and see what happens, or I'll apply to jobs and see what happens, or I'll post my job and hope people apply. I don't think there's enough cross training or cross skills referencing for folks to really understand what the other side needs.
Well, I love that because where you talk about that too is helping people. What you're alluding to is market research.
That's right.
So what do the companies need? Am I a good fit? And it doesn't have to be don't have to have 100% of all the things, but you also need to understand where your gaps are. So then you can close those gaps and put your best foot forward. And so do you find that a lot of people go into that blind, Alan, that they just, it's like playing whack-a-mole in the job market? Is that what people do?
It is both sides too, Michelle. It's the concept of throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. And there's some truth to that, right? Because the broken clock is right twice a day, they say. So you can generally be right over time. But I think if you take a more focused approach and you really use your energy on areas that make sense, just like if we're building a business, right? If you take on everything, you'll get nothing done, or you won't get as much done. I think that job seekers they're doing a better job, but and so are managers. There's so much more to do to focus your approach. What are you good at? Where do you want to be? If I'm a hiring manager, how much time have I really spent on the job posting, which is probably the single most important part of the whole job search. It's a marketing tool. If you're not putting out a compelling job description for people to read and think about and look at, you're not going to get compelling candidates.
Oh man, you know what's funny about this? We just had a gal that we were working with where we were doing her 90-day success plan as if she had already gotten the job. And we're going through this job description and it was so bad, Alan. I think that's what you just alluded to. It was so bad that we were trying to understand, where's the meat on this? This seems like fluff. Who wrote this? It makes absolutely no sense. But what we were able to do with her is showcase, all right, we're going to list what you're going to do in the first 30 days, what we're going to do in the first 60 days and the first 90 days. And then you can go into the interview with that. And let's confirm your assumptions, because there are a ton of assumptions that we could make in this job description. Now you have the ability to ask the questions. Is this right? Is this good? Did I hit the mark? Without saying your job description sucks.
There are long ways around that mountain sometimes, unfortunately. But yes, that you have to do that. That's good. I mean, that's coaching. That's helping them understand what their approach is. And it also helps them to do it better next time. So that was good.
Exactly.
Hope it worked.
It did. It was actually pretty cool. So what are some of the pitfalls you're seeing for folks? What holes are they falling into? Manholes.
Yep. So if we talk about the job seeker, the manhole continues to be taking jobs that you shouldn't take. And what I mean by that, so we go back to the short term versus long term. So if we talk about IT, right? So if we look at a 1 to 2 year cycle for IT, let's say 6 months is short term. There's a lot of turnover when it comes to somebody who takes a job or gets hired for the wrong reasons. So if you look at the process itself, most companies, we talked about this before, they hire for technical, fire for behavior. Well, most job seekers take jobs for what are not the primary reasons, but they make them primary, like money, location, commute, name brand, maybe. But they usually leave for the same reasons that they get fired, which is company culture. And so in their case, company culture. So one of the things that we try to teach is I want job seekers to first look at culture. Spend the time to create your own behavioral interview questions. Take the time to create your own insights. You talked before about research. Do the research on the organization. Don't get so caught up on
what are your values? What are their values? Do they align? Does this make sense?
That's right. Yeah. I find when I did this study years ago, and I still teach it today, I found it so fascinating that a job seeker will take a job for the reasons that a manager doesn't really think that much about, like money and location and geography. And a company will hire someone for reasons that the job seeker takes for granted, which is their skill set and their belief that the person can do the job. Job seekers always think more highly of themselves than they should. So they get the job for those reasons, which are should be secondary on both sides. But the number one reason why they either leave or are asked to leave are very similar between culture and behaviors. And I really wish that, and I'm training on this and people are getting better at it, but that's really an area that both sides can improve on to make it a better match.
Are you finding that companies are doing a better job of that culture question and hiring for it and understanding what their values are and the alignment, or not?
Well, in pockets. I mean, it's not binary like that, unfortunately. I wish it were. And I don't have the stats I can tell you are my personal observations.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to hear those.
So which are yes until it's a no. Isn't that terrible? So if they have time, so that's the other thing about hiring, right? And looking for a job. If you think, and we have our own businesses now, so it's hard to remember the last time we actually looked for a job, but it's a full-time job to look for a job.
Sure.
Hiring, and you remember your hiring days, that should be a full-time job also. It's one of the most important things we have to do as managers, but it's rarely the most urgent. Looking for jobs is usually the most important thing we have to do as job seekers, but it's rarely the most urgent. Indeed's always there. The post is always there. The resumes that applied are always there. So we have these other fires to put out. And I think that if on both sides they took more time to really focus on that result, that's where you get into the cultures and behaviors. So with that, going back to your question, same thing for job seekers and managers. They spend the right amount of time when they can, but then at some point the important becomes urgent and they just kind of move forward quickly. And then they sacrifice all those important things like culture and behaviors for the more urgent things like money and role and filling a seat.
Well, and it sounds like there's a short sheeting of quality in some cases based on we're all busy. We're not necessarily mindful of what quality looks like. What we talk about is what does good look like, and then hire for that if you're a company, or if you're a job seeker, then you're looking at what does good look like for you and that organization, the values, the culture, the work. I mean, the money, all of those things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, I'd like to leverage that into another point about what does good look like. The opposite of what I talked about happens also, and you've probably seen this as well, this is Amy, where managers and job seekers, but we see it more on the manager side, is they take too long to hire. They know what good is in their mind, and they're trying to find 100% of good, which really isn't, that's like perfect, but they really want 80% or 70% and train up the other 20 to 30%, but they don't. And job seekers do the same thing. I really want this, and this in the company, which is very well thought out. But if you're just in your own box and you don't stretch that out at all, if there's no give or take, then you're just stuck looking for a job for months and months and months with no result.
Yeah. And then that gets into what we talk about as far as imperfect action, right? I mean, in what you just described, whether it's the job seeker or it's the company, right, if you're striving for perfection and 100%, the likelihood of you achieving that result is going to be slim. And then you're going to be in this analysis paralysis stage. To your point, what does 80% look like? What are our must-haves on either side of the fence? And then can I train up or coach or do whatever to get that remaining 20%?
Yep. And I think that your stretch on the 70, 80, 60, 100, whatever your stretch is directly proportional to your urgency, your need, your pain. So if you're in a job, and let's just say it's a good job, but it's not exactly what you want for whatever reason, you've got more time to hunt for that perfect job. If you've got somebody that's retiring in a year, which happens, or let's be more realistic and say 3 months, they've given you notice, you have a little bit more time to wait for that perfect. At some point, that time runs out, right? And some kind of catalyst occurs, whether the actual termination date arises or whether your job is changed to a point where it's no longer tenable, at which point your stretch changes. So I think that that's part of what we coach people on is appreciating what those inner pieces are so you can prepare for them. And if you're in a good place now, let's get ready to look for what happens there next. And I think that's, that's where the trends to me have not changed. People, it's always been the case to be like this. I think where the trends are changing is with technology, with supply and demand, right? I've been through several cycles that have changed hands from more candidates to more jobs and less jobs, more candidates, whatever. I mean, it just changes.
Yeah, pain or pleasure is a good motivator, right?
Right. That's right.
Sometimes pain is a bigger motivator than pleasure, and
that's exactly right.
So, any final comments that you'd like to share, Alan, either on the company side of the house or the job seeker side of the house to help people progress in either one?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that I would leave both sides with the same thought, which is understand begin with the end in mind. We've heard that over and over. I think Covey started that, so many decades ago. But if you think about on the job seeker side, what does a compelling resume look like? And am I applying to jobs for which I'm qualified and interested? So begin with the end in mind. Am I looking at jobs for which really make sense for me? And if you're a hiring manager, begin with the end in mind. Does my job description really reflect what I'm looking for from an applicant or a candidate? Is this really going to be what the job looks like? Or am I just putting something out there and hope, I'll find it when I see it. I'm looking for a swag when I see it, right? That's right, the whack-a-mole. So I would encourage both sides. Just think about what you said it yourself. What does good look like, and work toward it.
Awesome, Alan. How can people get a hold of you? For those that are watching this later or watching now, how can people reach you?
Thanks, Michelle. Yep. So you can reach me at Alan, ALAN, at HROfficeSavers.com, or my phone number is 321-831-5995.
Awesome.
Thank you.
This is a great conversation, Alan. And I know that there's going to be people that'll pull nuggets. Oh, nice. Where was that in your background the whole time?
That was close, right?
Yeah. That looks good. Oh, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. And you have a fantastic day.
You too. It's good seeing you again.
You too. Bye.